Good morning, Intro to Corrections, and welcome to Module 2. So today I'm going to try and give you a little wrap-up of some of the reading material that you were assigned so that it will assist you in answering your questions and taking the quiz. So I made some notes here, and what I want to discuss with you first, Intro to Corrections, this is probably your first semester or your second semester at the most. So you haven't built the big foundation of a bunch of the terminology. So what I want to tell you first is that if you haven't taken the class Deviant Behavior, you definitely want to take the class as an elective. Okay. So Deviant Behavior is any kind of behavior. It does not have to be illegal. It just has to violate the social norms. So behavior, we dictate what we are willing to accept from one another. Do we expect people to hold doors open? Or do we consider it rude to just open the door, walk through, and let it slam on the next person? That could be considered, if the person just lets it close, that could be considered deviant behavior. It's rude. Criminal? Absolutely not. You're under no obligation to do that. However, we as a society have deemed what is appropriate. We also have deemed what we would consider to be punishable for violating social norms. That would include some people will actually say something to that individual. It's usually a snarky or a smart aleck comment that follows behind, like, "Oh, thanks for holding the door." That in itself is something that can be considered deviant behavior, because most people will be like, let it go, not everybody has the same manners or wasn't raised the same way, so they could consider that snarky little comment to be rude or bad behavior, so it would be a deviant behavior. Illegal? Absolutely not. All right, so just remember that deviant behavior is anything that violates social norms, anything that we do not feel is appropriate behavior. And that can change from classroom to classroom, community to community, state to state. Every little area has their own thing that they are willing to accept or expect from individuals. The next couple of definitions are really close, so you want to pay close attention. Illegal behavior does not necessarily mean criminal behavior. Some of these are what we call civil violations, so you'll be sanctioned civilly. If you roll through a stop sign, is it a criminal behavior? Not necessarily. Is it an illegal behavior? Yes, because we have rules that say when you come up to a stop sign, you're supposed to come to a full and complete stop. The other reason that we don't consider something like that a criminal behavior is that it's not always punishable in the same way that we would punish a criminal behavior. So we could give them a ticket, we could give them a warning, we could just sit there and give them, law enforcement could give them a lecture. So there's a lot of latitude there in the behavior and how it can be addressed or punished. You're not necessarily going to jail or prison because you rolled through a stop sign. Then where it gets a little dicey is most of us speed, okay? You're late for work, you're late for school, whatever it happens to be, so you're going over the speed limit. This is one I like to cover all three aspects in. Is speeding a deviant behavior? Probably not, because we almost all of us do it. So I usually, when I'm in class, I ask everybody to raise their hand. How many of you went over the speed limit on their way here? And almost all of them say they do. So going over the speed limit is something that we accept and tolerate and condone. So therefore, it is not a deviant behavior. It is an illegal behavior until you get to a certain point, okay? Different states have different speed limit issues where we'll allow it to be considered illegal. And it's not until you hit, like here in Florida, it's not necessarily, it doesn't cross over into criminal behavior, until you're going about 20 miles an hour over the limit. That takes it from you're getting a ticket, or if somehow you get a very lucky law enforcement officer, a warning, a lecture, whatever. But if you're doing 20 or over, they have the ability to knock it down and say you were only doing 18 over, which then puts you back in illegal behavior. But 20 or over, we're going to court, okay? You have committed an offense that is illegal, and it also is something that we consider a violation against the community. You're putting other people at risk, you're putting people in fear. So realize, and the punishment for that can be taking your driver's license. You can still have the civil sanctions, taking your driver's license away. A lot of them will be fines, but you can go to jail. Okay, maybe it's 30 days, maybe not, but it could be longer depending on how many times you've committed this offense. So just realize that illegal behavior does not mean that it is always criminal, does not mean that it is always deviant. However, criminal behavior is always deviant and always illegal. All right? Kind of a weird concept, so listen to that over a couple of times, or read it in your assigned readings. But there is a difference between the three, and they overlap and they mix. But it's all going to depend on where you live, how you were raised, and what the community considers acceptable. So, and besides, criminal behavior is actually labeled misdemeanors, felonies, and summary offenses. And summary offenses are usually minor things that we hit with a fine. The misdemeanor and felonies, depending on what they are and what level, will let you know how we're going to punish you, so to speak. Let's see. The next thing I think that's important probably in this module to discuss can be opinion based, but we have ways of doing it, and that's pre-trial confinement, meaning that before you have committed an illegal act, a criminal act, so it's something that we're going to punish you, and going to jail or prison is an option. Okay, so it's a criminal act. But do we necessarily have to put you in jail prior to trial, prior to conviction and sentencing? Okay, that's what pre-trial confinement is. So I have the option. This is why when I do research, I study in both the jail and the prison. Prison is post-conviction, and it's longer term sentencing. It's anything that's a year or more, okay? Jail is a hodgepodge of everybody, and I don't think a lot of people realize that. You have people that are there on an offense, and they're just being held until they can get out, pay the fee, the fine, the whatever, okay? They are people that have violated probation, which might have been for something very minor, but because they violated, they're now going to spend XYZ amount of time in the local jail. It also has your serious offenders. It has the one I happen to have spent some time with several years ago was a gentleman who killed a law enforcement officer. Okay, so he was up for a serious, serious offense and hadn't gone to trial yet, and hadn't been convicted, and he hadn't been sentenced. But so he was in the jail, okay, because he hadn't been convicted yet, you can't send him to prison. He hasn't earned that yet or deserved that yet. One of the local cases that you can look at, because he's been in jail several years now, do I have my own personal opinions because I have been following and studying this case of where I think it's going to go? Yes. But if you look up the case of Austin Harruff, he is the young FSU college student that several years ago got into a fight with his family, was a stellar human being prior to this event, but he is the one that you will remember in Martin County in the Tequesta area, but on the Martin County side. So it's being tried in Martin County when we get there. That ate the face and killed two individuals. Like when law enforcement pulled up, he was literally chewing the guy's face off and growling like a dog. So the defense that I've heard he's going with is going to be an insanity plea, and he's going to state that he was a lycanthrope. He was a werewolf. And I have some opinions on that and how that's going to go, because werewolves are dogs, so to speak. Wolves are dogs. And the law enforcement officer that walked the prosecution and the state and everybody through the offense, when he pulled up on the scene, one of the first things he says is the state asks him, what was Mr. Harruff doing or saying at the time that you pulled up? And the officer says, he was eating the guy's face. He was begging for me to just kill him and stop him, and growling like a dog. That part right there is probably the most pivotal point in the whole thing, because that's going to play in for the defense. So that's going to be very interesting. If you haven't been following that case, you should follow it. It has just had its third psychological evaluation, forensic evaluation, that was ordered, and we will hopefully start that proceeding sometime this year. Could be as early as August. I don't think that's going to happen, but I think the next court date is in August to see where we're going forward and what's going to happen. So, is somebody that committed that kind of an offense, which is most definitely criminal. He murdered two people. He severely injured the neighbor who tried to save or help the wife prior to it going too far. Is he somebody that we should allow to be out in the public, to be given a community sanction, which means he has to be at home, he has a curfew, this and that. He may have to wear an ankle monitor. He may have to call and check in every day. He would only be allowed to go to work or school. Has to provide all of that information to his probation officer, which is who he would go see even though he hasn't been convicted yet. Or should we not allow him community sanctions and put him in pretrial confinement, which is what was the choice? It was determined that he, Austin, was a danger to himself and others. So he has been sitting for several years in the Martin County Jail. You can debate whether or not that's fair with him or any other offender, because you're confining them and taking them out of society, out of their family, altering their life completely. And I just realized I didn't have this on, sorry, that'll help. So, not the bags under my eyes from not sleeping last night, but at least you can see me. So, Austin is not somebody that I would want running around my neighborhood. Not just because he killed two people, but why did he kill two people? And so far, we haven't been privy to. I do have one of his psych evaluations that I was gifted. But we don't know exactly what happened that day that allowed him to exhibit that type of behavior that resulted in those deaths. So, is he somebody you want walking down your neighborhood and just taking a walk or riding his bike or living next door to or hanging out with your kids or going to IRSC? Do you want to sit in class with them? It's not that we want to punish him because that would be premature, because there may be an explanation for this behavior that was beyond his ability to control. But are you going to feel safe having you, your friends, your family, your kids, whatever, be exposed to him not knowing what caused that behavior? Are you willing to take that risk? So Austin has been given pretrial confinement. He is in jail. He is monitored. He, for all intents purposes, he lives like an inmate. Okay. But he is treated slightly differently because he has not been convicted of his offense yet. Okay. So that is definitely one to watch, and that is one that I will probably bring up every once in a while. But I will also be bringing up the case of White and White, which is the correctional officer White, who got into a relationship with the felon with the last name of White. They are not related, and ran away together. So had developed a deviant behavior, which was getting into a romantic relationship with one another. Fascinating case. I'm following it, I'm researching it, and it happens more than you think. The relationships, it just doesn't happen that they escape or run away together. So we've seen this a couple of times, at least two that I'm aware of, that have been a big deal in the last 5 to 10 years. But it's a correctional issue. So I'm going to bring up some things because you're going to be shocked at a lot of the stuff that goes on within institutional facilities. So realize that a jail, in my opinion, can be more dangerous than a prison because it holds a variety of individuals. Pre-trial, pre-sentencing, they could be felons that are going to go off to prison. They just haven't been picked up yet. Even once they're sentenced, it could take up to 30 days or so for that bus to make the loop to take people, because we've got multiple prisons. And just because you were convicted here in Martin County doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be assigned to Martin Correctional. You could be sentenced to any place else. Okay, so it's not necessarily a quick move. In the jail, you also have those people that haven't been convicted yet, or the people that are in there on drug charges or minor offenses. So you run the gamut of running into every type of offender possible. Prison, we know you're doing felony time. Okay, so we know what we're getting, and there are more restrictions in place, more security in place, and they are usually not in the center of town or a residential area, okay, where we build. And here in Martin County, our Martin County jail used to be way, way outside of town. However, as we've grown and gotten bigger, it's now right smack in the middle of town. Okay, so we try not to let that happen with prisons. They're usually out there. I guess we'll say Florida no longer has parole. Okay, you have probation and parole is when somebody gets out of prison and they're getting out a little earlier, but they're still gonna do the amount of time on parole, checking in with a probation officer. It used to be parole officers, and then eventually they have to go, they actually, before they even get out, they actually go before the parole board, and those individuals will decide whether or not they have been rehabilitated enough to be safely reintegrated into the community. Now, we no longer have that as an option to give as a sentence here in Florida, But do we still have people on parole? Yes. People that were sentenced to that prior to, so we have them in prison and we have them out of prison. Those that are out will be accountable to a probation officer, but we do have those people because they were given that sentence prior to our getting rid of parole here in Florida. The other thing I think that I need to get into you, just because this is a terminology kind of thing I want to get to you today, and then I probably will try and get you up another one that I really want to start talking about the White case, because it's interesting and information is coming fast and furious. And sorry. And I want to get some of that information to you so that we can discuss it. And that may change the way some of our assignments. I may make them more specific to what's happening here in real life instead of something that's academic and that you're reading, okay? It allows you to exhibit your opinion as well as ask questions, okay? And for me, real life is the best and fastest way to learn. So, last two terms, aggravating and mitigating circumstances. Aggravating, just your blood pressure is going up, so just think of it as up. It's an enhancement, okay? An aggravating circumstance can be you committed offense. Let's just say you beat somebody up. Was it a senior citizen? Because that's an enhancement. That's extra time being added on. It's an extra charge simply because it was a violation against an elderly, okay? Children are the same. Then you could have a hate crime. If we can prove, they're not always easy to prove, but a hate crime is an enhancement. It's an aggravating circumstance. If you committed your offense against somebody just because of their religion, their race, their ethnicity, whatever it happens to be, if we can prove that you have that hatred, that is an enhancement. It's a hate crime. All right? Last one, mitigating circumstances. These are the ones just the opposite. They are going to be reasons that you may have committed your offense. They could be mental health issues. They could be you were forced to do something that you didn't want to do but put in a situation. They could be environmental issues. They are basically things that we are going to look at post-conviction, and these both happen in the sentencing phase. So it helps the judge to decide what is fair, and this allows, for me, I think it's fair because I like to look at every case as an individual situation. I don't want them all lumped together. So the reason one person may kill somebody is a completely different reason than somebody else. This person killed somebody because they were cheating on them, okay? They were cheating on their spouse. That's not a mitigating factor. It's not even an aggravating factor. That's just somebody who made a really stupid choice in life, okay? This person over here is suffering from extreme spousal abuse, okay? Domestic violence, male or female. They're being affected mentally, emotionally, financially. They're put in a really bad situation. And at one point in time, they may snap and defend themselves and kill that individual. The judge can look at that and see if there is enough of that there to use that as a mitigating factor. And instead of punishing them, are they still guilty? Absolutely, they killed somebody. But do we need to punish them in the same extent or the same way as the person over here that did it just because their girlfriend was cheating? Not necessarily. Okay, so I prefer to look at each and every case differently. So I guess that's all I have for you right now. It should be plenty for you to be able to do your discussion post and your quiz, but please go back and read. Check into the news and keep up with the White story so that you can keep up with me as I jump into it. And other than that, have a great weekend. So I will catch you with my next video as hopefully soon. If not, it will definitely be coming up in Module 3. Have a good weekend.